And welcome to Kicking It with Sensei. And today we're joined by an old guest again who's been on the show before, and it's Matt Pasquinilli. And Matt runs a fantastic YouTube channel here and does a lot of bow, cane, self-defense stuff for self-defense. You're very welcome, Matt.
Thank you. It's good to see you again.
Yes, pleasure having you on again. And particularly, I wanted to do an episode based around teaching kids and the different sort of direction you would take between teaching kids and teaching adults. And I thought, who best to speak about it than yourself? I know you teach a lot of kids classes, and you've also got a book out around child behavior, isn't it?
I do. There's a couple of things that I've written in, one by myself, and then I had done a lot of programming with professors at university. Yeah. And so I've written some things with a specialist, a psychologist, who's also works in a teacher's college in Ohio. And so that was kind of the basis of a lot of the things that I had done. A lot of research went into what we do and how I do it. So it's not just it's not just my ideas, it's the best of best practices and the things that have worked for so many other programs applied into the martial arts.
Excellent. And I know a lot of people train martial arts for many years and then kind of get thrown into a teaching position. Do you think it's important to actually study teaching as well as the martial arts to actually become a good teacher of martial arts?
Yeah, no, I agree absolutely. I grew up in a martial arts school where the head instructor was an Olympic coach, and we had 19 world champions in the school and some amazing fighters. And then in addition to those world champions, every instructor was an amazing fighter. And because the program was so sound, almost anybody could teach the program, the basics, but that you would have a class with 3 students because the instructor was a really bad teacher. He was an amazing fighter. He could beat everybody. He had great technique. His form, his kata was exceptional. He won world championships and traveled around the world to compete either in kata or in fighting or both, but that didn't make him a great instructor. And then you would have one instructor who might have, he might be equally as proficient in fighting or kata or whatever, but was an amazing teacher just naturally. None of them really studied teaching. And back then, I think that was really the way things were for a long time. Your instructor came to you and said, I need somebody Monday night at 5 o'clock. And the guy who was teaching it doesn't want to do it anymore. You're the low guy on the totem pole. It's your turn. And so a lot of people get thrown into it that way, and whether they're ready or not. And when you own a martial arts school, you understand that model very clearly because you find yourself in the same position. You're tired. You're teaching all the classes, and then you take some kid who's been with you for 5 or 10 years, and they're now a black belt, but they might not necessarily be the best instructor. So I set out, because I ran a nonprofit for such a long time, to intentionally solve that problem. When we started the nonprofit, I had a vision of creating a program to teach instructors. And then over time, as I worked with more people in the School of Education who were much smarter than me and more experienced that way, of finding a way to identify the best people to teach. So using something like industrial psychology, where you might be familiar with Briggs Myers and these other measures. That Strength Finders was a book that was really popular that a lot of people use. And so you can identify the traits that make somebody a great instructor naturally and hire for that. And so since I had a nonprofit and I had created a structure where I could do it, I eventually, after so many years of being in operation, was able to only hire the best people and then train them from scratch. No martial arts experience, train them how to be the best instructors. And if you think about, especially with children, you don't have to be a high-level black belt with perfect technique to teach a 5-year-old how to stand still and pay attention and do a low block or do a front kick. But that's how a lot of people see it, and they get stuck in this idea that you have to have the qualification of a black belt to teach. So I would take somebody who would make a great kindergarten teacher or a lower school teacher who was bubbly and excited to be around kids, loved children, And, you know, and so many martial arts instructors don't love children, aren't patient with it. And so if you go from the other way and kind of reverse engineer the best instructor for children, you would want to find somebody like that who naturally is good with kids, and then say, here's the script, here's the process, here's the checklist. This has to happen in a class, first, second, third, fourth. Go through the checklist just as if you worked at McDonald's and you had to clean the bathroom. You had a checklist. This has to happen, this has to happen, to make sure that it's clean to the same standard. When you set the standard for the class and then you hire the right person, you can then train them using checklists and scripts. These are the words you can say, never say these words. And then we became very effective. And I had some of the most amazing, you know, young instructors. And the most exciting thing to me was that they would ignite a passion for martial arts at some point. I would see it in almost every single one. And these were all college students who were either in a graduate program or were toward the end of their undergraduate teaching degree, but then they weren't sure about what their next step, because when students here in the United States go into the end of their 4 or 5 year teaching degree, they have to do something called student teaching, where they go into a classroom and first they shadow or they follow the teacher, you know, a seasoned teacher or an experienced teacher, and then for the second part of the school year, they actually have to start learning how to teach and being on the floor, and it's kind of an apprenticeship program. A lot of them become very frustrated because it's not what they expected, and it's not what they expected, not because it's harder. It's more because sometimes they get a teacher who's jaded or angry or frustrated, doesn't want to do it anymore. They're very negative, and so that really turns a lot of them off. I was able to take those same people and pay them the same amount as a school salary, getting teacher salary, and put them in my program and put them in schools where we work as a nonprofit, teaching a martial arts program, you know, either after school or during the school day. And then in my building, in my facility, and they were just amazing instructors. And then as they were there over a period of time, the same amount of time it would take to get a normal black belt, they become, because they're doing it now, the blocks, the punches, the kata, every single day, they're better than all of the other black belts who, were at first skeptical of them because, why are they teaching? The only challenge was how you identify them as an instructor. And, traditionally they're a black belt, they're an instructor, right? Which we know that's what we're discussing. That's not really the qualification because it's two different skill sets. And so what I did was I would use like a white belt. They're a white belt, but I put black stripe on it, which meant they're a white belt in the martial arts, but they're a black belt in the teaching method because, this is a 4 or 5 year student who's been studying how to teach. And then I would give them, the simple stuff. So that's one solution. The other thing is if you can take a lot of schools still, because they feel like they have to put adults and students together, adults and children, right? And so the needs of an adult and the needs of a child are so extremely different. The way they learn is different. Their limitations are different. Their interests are different. Their physical needs are different. Their emotional needs are different. Their learning styles are different. And so when you put them together, you compromise all the way around. And the saying goes, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so the child's the squeaky wheel always. So the children are getting most of the attention of the instructor is getting worn out, and the adults are getting less than martial arts. And then the last thing I'll say about that, and I know you probably have some more ideas to add to that, is that the things that we teach kids are not really martial arts in many, many ways. A lot of times parents come to us because, and rightly or wrongly, I mean, that's a whole different discussion, but they come to us, Johnny's not paying attention at school. Johnny doesn't listen to his dad. Johnny's bedroom's not clean. I told Johnny to do this. And when he talked back, I told him I was going to tell you today when we came to class. I just stand there and I cringe and I think, one, not my job. You're the parent. Two, don't make Johnny afraid of me. He's not going to want to come to my class. And then I lose a student and I lose income because it's a business. And three, I'm not magic. I'm not doing any magic. I'm just saying to Johnny, stand still, look at me. It's self-defense is eye contact first. If
Yeah.
you don't see the punch coming, you can't respond to it. Look at me the same way you're looking at your mom, or, look at your mom the same way you're looking at me, and she's going to feel respected. So there's a little things that we do, but that's not martial arts. I'm helping you with parenting. And so for all those reasons, and that's probably why, after 20 some years of running the nonprofit in Ohio with this large footprint, I find myself in Florida with a really small footprint. But the funny thing is, because of COVID, I kind of flinched and found myself back in a school. And I think I mentioned to you through the email yesterday, I did the math, and I'm teaching, over 250 students a week again.
Yeah.
I ended up with 9 classes yesterday, 10 the day before, 9 the day before that. And I had an hour-long 3-year-old class yesterday, martial arts class, in a hot room, because it's really hot here in South Florida right now. It's in the 90s in Fahrenheit, 92 degrees. It was hot. I've got these 3-year-olds, and I'm standing there thinking to myself, how did I find myself in this position again? I'm not teaching them martial arts. I'm teaching them pay attention, listen to me, stand still, and it's all valuable stuff. And martial arts can do all that. But if you can make that clear distinction in your head, then you can make a better decision about it. I think what happens is most instructors feel conflicted all the time. They feel like they're compromising. They feel like they're failing. You're either failing as a martial arts instructor, or you're failing as a business person, because if you say to the mom that brings in the kid, look, lady, I am not a psychologist, which is true. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a nanny. That's also true. And I'm not a nursemaid. I'm not going to wipe his nose and wipe his bum. That's your job. Don't ask me to do it. Then you're afraid she's going to walk away. But then I put him in the class, and he's disruptive, and I'm constantly correcting his behavior. And I get it all the time. Parents say to me with amazement, he's never listened to anybody before, like he did to you today. It was so amazing. He paid attention to you for a whole hour. And when I was a young man, that would be flattering. As an old man, it's frustrating, because I'm thinking, yes, I know I can do that, but that's not what I want to do. I want to be a martial artist. I want to be a martial arts instructor. And so, but you have to, right? We have to make compromises. We have to exist in society. I don't think we compromise to the point where you become the popular term McDojo, where you're just doing it for money, but who's getting rich, right? I'm not getting rich. You're not getting rich.
Definitely not.
That's just one of the dumbest arguments people have made forever. There are some big charlatan, phony schools who are really good at, they're very commercial. Kids get a black belt in a year, and they're 7 years old, and that's ruined our industry. But for the rest of us, we're just doing the best we can to teach the thing that we're so passionate about. We know how it changed us. I started as a kid. You probably started as a kid, and it was transformative. It was what we needed. Saved my life many, many times, both literally and figuratively, and spiritually, emotionally. But, martial arts is martial arts. That's what I want to promote or teach. I don't necessarily want to be daddy daycare.
Yeah.
Or Maddie daycare, or whatever you want to call it.
Maddie daycare, I like that now.
Yeah.
But a lot of martial arts schools now, especially, advertise by using confidence, focus, all these kind of life skills. Do you think it is important to sort of build them into the martial arts training? And what do you think is the best way of actually putting them into place? Is it just something, I know a lot of schools now would just teach how to punch and kick and just expect these things to appear out of nowhere. But do you think it's important to spend time on building them skills as well?
I do think it's important to build those skills only if it's congruent and it works inside the curriculum of martial arts. So if you're teaching block, punch, kick, grapple, whatever it is that your martial art is, that's what you have to teach. You have to teach that exceptionally well. To teach that exceptionally well, you have to have a classroom that has discipline. The classroom has to have a good, solid structure. Children have to be paying attention. They have to be doing hard things in order to grow. Because those things are all true, if you understand how confidence is built, how grit and determination and focus, and all of those buzzwords that you mentioned. And to your point, I had not a friend, somebody that I knew for years and years since he was younger and I was younger, competitively. And then he owned a school. I ran a large nonprofit. I had the biggest school in town. He had another school, and we were all at a tournament, right? And the rumor was he didn't like me, which I understood that he didn't like me. And I, and I always tell kids this, that the good thing is if someone doesn't like you, that's good, because you realize in life, not everybody's going to like you, one, and two, you don't have to like everybody else, right? So anyway, so we find ourselves together having a conversation in a group of other local martial arts business owners. So all of us are sitting there, we're all in the same state, most of us in the same area, same town. And his somehow he mentioned that, he was coming into my territory. He was trying to poke at me a little bit. And he said, I know that you're over in this side of town. I'm starting to get some students from over there. And I said, I know, I saw your flyer. And I said, you took the flyer that I made and you put your face on it and you changed the name, but it was my flyer. And he laughed and he said, yeah, he said, because, your flyer mentions focus and discipline and all these other things. And that's what people really want. I said, well, how do you teach that? Because I know how I teach it. I said, how do you teach that? He says, you don't have to teach it. You just have to put it on the flyer. And he was dead serious. He wasn't just pushing my buttons or trying to wind me up. He really meant it. And I know him outside of the martial arts. He's not a good person. He doesn't have the same values that I think martial artists should have. So I knew he meant it when he said it. But so the point is this: if you say discipline, that we teach discipline, how, why, what's the structure in the classroom? Everybody lines up. Everybody has a certain spot where class starts. Do you bow in? Do you not talk while the instructor's talking? We start with a short meditation. What's the purpose of the meditation? It's to just mentally prepare for the class. It's not spiritual, or it's not religious. It's just a moment to stop and become mindful. You teach mindfulness. How do you teach mindfulness? Mindfulness just means being present in the moment. If you're fighting, whether you're striking or grappling, you have to be present in the moment. If you're doing self-defense, you have to be present. So if you understand how they correlate, and then you can have that smart conversation with the parent, and then as you're writing your copy, under the headlines of all the benefits that you teach, and you should really be telling stories instead of using benefits, but as you're describing how you do what you do, you have to put it in terms that make sense. It's not mat chats. Mat chats was a term that came up about maybe 15, 20 years ago, where you bring them out to the mats, and you sit them all down, get them on a knee, and you tell them a little story about discipline and the three ducks. And they went out, and so there were a lot of programs that came out that were selling their mat chats. Buy my mat chats, memorize the script, and then give it to the kids, and then tell everybody you teach discipline. That's not how you teach discipline. You teach discipline when you're kicking up and down the floor for 20 minutes, right? And then when the kid wants to quit and give up and go cry to mommy, who I kicked out of the lobby so that he couldn't do that, I tell him, you're strong enough, you're going to be able to do this. You don't get to quit. You're allowed to be tired. You're not allowed to give up. You're allowed to be out of wind or out of breath. You can slow down, but you can't quit. You're allowed to, your arms can burn because I've made you keep your hands up the whole time, and that's going to make you stronger. It's okay if you feel that way. It's okay for it to be hard. You're just not allowed to quit. And that's how you build grit. That's how you build determination. That's how you build focus and discipline and all those things. And then if you're smart, this is one extra step that is like kind of my silver bullet, the secret, because I do this for the parents. While the parents are sitting, I'm talking to the child, and I'll say to him, you're looking at me the way that makes me feel respected. As a teacher, as a grown man, as an adult, you're a child, you're a student. But when you look at me like that, I feel respected by you. Your mom's going to feel the same way. Go to school tomorrow, and tomorrow, look at the teacher the same way you're looking at me. Sit still the way you're standing still right now, at attention. Because that's what we do in class. We have them stand still. We have them hold a position, ready stance, whatever you want to call it. Even if it's grappling, there's always a starting position, there's a finishing position, there's a ready position, there's a focus position. While the instructor's talking, they all have to look at the instructor. right?
Yeah.
The way you're looking at me. And so these are, now you don't have to make anything up. Now you don't need a Matt chat. Now you don't need some ridiculous story about the three ninja ducks who did the whatever. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's kind of a joke, but that's real. That's a real thing that people sold. Now you don't have to buy some psychologist / martial artists, you know, 17-point program on how to study child psychology for several $1,000s or several $100s a month just to put it in your program, put posters on the wall. And you don't need any of that. It's like when I go into elementary schools, which when I ran the nonprofit, I taught thousands of kids a year actively, because I would do 6 weeks at a school. Sometimes I'd do 2 or 3 schools at once. I'd do 5 or 6 classes a day. And then I had 300 or 400 kids in my program at night. But when I would go into these schools and I would walk through the hallway, all these elementary schools, middle schools, high schools down here in the States, they have these signs and posters that says integrity. It's what you do when no one's watching. And that's a very popular one. A lot of us have heard that. But I always think of like picking your nose, fixing your underwear, pulling the wedgie out. That's what you do when no one's watching, but none of that is integrity. It's not, that's certainly not integrity, right? Integrity is when you're the same. When you stand still and you're in this ready position and you're paying attention to me, and then your mom starts to talk to you or your dad, and you look at him and you stop what you're doing, you put your hands down and you think about what he's saying. Then you go to school tomorrow and the teacher's talking to you and you sit still, even though you're uncomfortable, and you look at your teacher and you think about what she says and you take notes. That's integrity. You're the same in all 3 places. That's what integrity really means, by the way. It's not what you're doing, no one's watching. All those big, but that's what so many of these programs where we separate, we divorce. I'm going to teach character skills, life skills. They have all kinds of names for them. Discipline, focus, all of these things. I'm going to teach them here after I teach kicking and punching, or next to teaching and punching. But the kicking and punching is teaching not giving up, not quitting, pushing yourself, perseverance, discipline, focus, all those things. So when you understand that the way you got to be a black belt was a template or a model for teaching discipline, and then you just put the words to it so that you can have an intelligent conversation with a parent and say, I'm going to tell you how we teach grit in this class. I'm going to tell you how I teach leadership in the class. The older students, they come in and they lead by example first. We bow at the door. They bow to the classroom, the flag, all that.
Yeah.
They come in with the thing quietly. They make sure all their stuff is ready. They line up first. They lead by example. Second, they look around because I told them this. I've trained them. And they look for the kids who need help, who are new. They help them tie their belts. They help them find their spot. They help remind them to stand quietly and wait for class with patience. And then during the class, they lead by example. I have them lead the kata. I have them lead a warm-up. I have them lead 25 jumping jacks. I have them lead 25 laps around the dojang, the dojo, whatever it is that you do. And these are all truthful statements. And that's where people get mixed up with this separation of one thing and another, is that they don't feel confident teaching because they're not a psychologist, which is true. They shouldn't feel, they don't need to give a dissertation or a lecture on what grit or focus or discipline is. They just need to point to the class and say, see that 12-year-old boy who has the brown belt? He's working very hard on becoming a black belt. In order for him to do that, he knows first he has to lead by example. All the other kids are looking up to him. And if he doesn't lead by example, he's not going to turn into a black belt. He's going to stay at that until he learns it. And every parent gets that right away. And then you say, and after that, that's not enough for leadership as a black belt. Then he has to develop his voice, because he has to be able to say to somebody, you don't have to like me, but you can't touch me. You don't have to like me, but you can't talk to me that way. Because he has to learn how to speak up to a bully and stand up for himself. And that comes from every time he throws that loud, powerful kia. Every time he yells in the class, he's working on that loud voice. When I put him in front of the class and I say, now you're going to lead 25 jumping jacks and you're going to count them out. 1. And I say 1, sir, 2, sir, because a lot of other reasons. And there's a lot of psychology. Again, like I said, I worked with university to develop a lot of these things. Yeah. And the funny thing is, a lot of what I do comes from Sesame Street, the American PBS show, public broadcasting station. Have you ever seen Sesame Street? You know, it's
yeah.
it's been around for 30, 40, 50, I don't know how
It's
long.
a long, long time.
I was a kid. Yeah. But Sesame Street is run by a teachers college in New York, which is considered to be the #1 teachers college in the United States, Columbia University. And the graduate students run Sesame Street. They oversee it, and it's created to accomplish the same thing. America had something called Head Start for a long time, which was a program to get kids into early education before school, preschool, and especially in communities where there was a lot of poverty and not very much access to resources. And so there was a study that showed if kids watched PBS Sesame Street, they watched Sesame Street every day, or they went to Head Start, kids in Sesame Street actually were learning more and they were retaining more. And it's because they do everything in 3 ways. And so everything that I do now is done in 3 ways. I teach, and these are all little tricks, but it's still martial arts, right? It's martial arts at its core. It's if it doesn't work as practical martial arts, I don't want to teach it, right? And that means I'm not going to get out there and do some fun, fancy kicking drill because somebody came up with it and it's a fun way to play a game and keep kids in the school so they don't quit. I'm going to go out and we're going to kick the bag. We're going to do 1,000 kicks in a week, or we're going to do, in some classes, 1,000 kicks in a class, and they're all going to be done as focused as we can get them. And the purpose is, and so as long as you know the purpose and of the thing, then you put your heart behind it and you get it done, right? And that's another thing that I think a lot of instructors struggle with, especially if they're as a beginner, whether it's kids or adults, but especially kids, is they're worried the kids are going to become bored. But what you have to remember is, if they're bored, it's because you're boring, right? And if you're boring, you're doing it in a boring way. You're not believing in it. You're not energetic. You're not enthusiastic. And so instead, and I've seen so many programs now where the instructor, they hire these young kids and they train them how to be like almost a cartoon character, or like a barker at a carnival. Just, just fake excitement. And that's not martial arts either. That's jackassery. That's a term I like to throw out every once in a while. I don't think that works either. Don't become ridiculous trying to get the kids to pay attention. Be sure of what you're doing. Be committed to what you're doing. Understand the value in it. I teach you the way that I would teach my kid, the way that I do teach my kids. If any man comes up and puts his hands on one of my children, especially my daughter, I want her to be able to really defend herself, to fight in the way that gets the attention of somebody else, that lets her get away from there, get out of there, because I studied self-defense so much, and children's self-defense especially, and I believe in all the things that I do, and so I teach other kids, parents' kids, that too. So there's no room for me to be Mr. Cartoon, excitement, fake excitement teacher. I'm going to teach you, I'm going to be serious. I can smile, but I'm going to be dead serious. And when I say to a child, get your hand, you've got to hit harder, you have to do this, you have to do this. I'm not doing it in a mean way. I'm doing it in a way that, because I believe in it so much, right? And so if you believe in it, you understand the value in it and why you're doing it, then I think that enthusiasm comes out, the motivation comes out, and then you can learn, you can read a book on the best way to do this or that, but I don't think any of that is really necessary. I think common sense is necessary. I think, a basic tip would be, if you're really tall and the kid's really small, get down on the knee, make eye contact, but other than that, and that's every once in a while, that's not every single time. And don't dumb anything down. Don't make it, you might give them smaller pieces of it, and you might get, just like you would, if you go to a steak dinner, you might eat a steak this big, but your kids are only going to eat this much, and you're going to cut it up for them in really small pieces so they don't choke on it. And that's the same thing with martial arts. Give them the same steak, is my point. Don't always give them a hot dog and ketchup. Don't always give them, that's what kids eat here, eat chicken fingers and ranch dressing. Don't always give them kid food. Give them, because they're at a steak dinner. Martial arts is a steak dinner. They're not here to eat chicken fingers and hot dogs. So you don't always have to feed them that. Teach them how to eat steak, how to appreciate it, but you're going to have to make a small piece and cut it up, and maybe put a little bit of ketchup on it. But my kids don't eat steak on their ketchup, or ketchup on their steak, so I wouldn't recommend it.
No, my kids love steak now. It's
Yeah, it's expensive.
but you mentioned earlier about in the school system now that teachers would have worked sort of supervised for a while before actually taking on teaching themselves. Do you think that should be applied in the martial arts as well, where so before someone's kind of ready to teach a class on their own, they should be supervised by a more senior instructor and kind of given that chance to kind of experience it before sort of being thrown in the deep end, really?
Absolutely. But again, you already have a natural structure with the belt system. So most schools still use a belt system. If you have a belt system and you're getting close to the black belt, if that's what your school has as the high level belt, meaning no longer the beginner, but you know what I mean. Some
Yeah.
schools it's red and white or whatever. So let's just say black belt. So when they're getting close to the black belt, what I would do when I identify everybody had the requirement to learn how to teach. Not everybody became an instructor for me, because some of them, even though I put them through the process, at the end I didn't want them for the reasons I mentioned before. They might be a great fighter, not a great instructor. I wouldn't put them anywhere near a kid. In fact, I would tell them, I'd say, you know what, you're really good at this, and I'm going to have you work with the senior students and help them be better black belts or help them be better seniors with their forms. But I'm not going to put you with the little white belts because they're all going to quit, because they're not qualified. They don't have the right. They couldn't overcome some of their personalities. And I always had a third of my members on the autism spectrum too. So I had a lot of great autistic kids become great instructors. And then they were even better with the autistic kids who came in because they naturally understood how they think, and they could get them to do things that other people couldn't. But so as a student gets closer to the black belt, and so for us, we had like brown was the first senior belt, and then red, and then it would go like dark blue, and then black with a white stripe was kind of, and that was a 1 year. You had to be at that level, that one below black belt for a full year. And that becomes their apprenticeship. Not only are they working on their qualification to become a black belt because of, with the physical skills and the knowledge, but they also had to volunteer or be assigned to a class. And I always paid my instructors. If I had a kid, if they were 14 and older in the United States, you can get a letter from the school and you can work, a small number of hours. But whether they were a kid or an adult, they would have to then at least once a week be an assistant in a class, never teach a full class by themselves. And again, I think a lot of times people are thrown into that too soon because the instructor has a need, and they have a need Monday at 5, and that's the only warm body that they can put in there. And they're getting paid by all those parents or all those students to come to that class. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. So if you have a structure where you can say, okay, you're getting close to your black belt, part of this is leadership. Leadership is how you carry yourself in the classroom. Leadership by example, that your forms are always, sharp and precise, that you don't ever move in a lazy way, or, you know what I mean? All the things that we require black belts. And they understand that because they've seen it modeled by you, ideally. It's like kids don't do what you tell them to do. They do what they see you do. So you have this you've created the structure. And then once they would graduate to black belt, now they have all of this experience, and you would have them do small little pieces. Lead the warm up, lead kata number 3 or whatever it was, or lead this kicking drill. And they had done it so many times, they could lead it because they knew it from doing it. Yeah. And then as I would be there, or one of my other instructors, because I had a large teaching staff. They were trained. We had everybody's name on a chart, and I would give them a teacher assessment form, and they would stand there, and I would teach them. And I had done it with them, how to give appropriate feedback, and it was in several different categories. Clarity of the voice. How loud are they? Are they articulate? Does it make sense what they said? Do they demonstrate? Explain, demonstrate, and then have them do it. And then correct, there's those basic teaching things that we do. Yeah. And so all that was on a chart, like a checklist. And then once a quarter, I would do assessments of all the main instructors. Main instructors would do assessments of the next level. The next level would do all the assessments of their assistants in their individual class. Yeah. And then those, and then you would take them. It only takes 2 to 5 minutes. And a lot of this comes from, like, when I was in the Army National Guard here in the United States, the Army does something called an after action report. The Marine Corps had something like that too when I was in the Marine Corps, but in the Army, it's really well put together, and they're very smart questions. What went well? What went wrong? What do we have to do different next time? And so it was sort of that similar, that thing, and it was just give them one thing. Don't overwhelm them with you weren't loud enough, you didn't move fast enough, you didn't think on your feet fast enough, because then they're like, oh, I'll never be able to do it. I'm not very good. But if you say, okay, I was watching you today, and you did this well, this well, and this well. You can always find 2 or 3 things, right? And here's where I want you to work on. You have to be louder, and don't mince words. Don't beat around the bush. Don't, never. And I'm very good at this. Don't ever tell a child that he is slow. The rest of your, certain things that you can't say, because I have a list of things you can't say. You don't listen to me. You just can't pay attention, can you? Or that's a weak kick. You kick like a girl. One of the stupid things anybody ever says in the class, but that you still hear it. And most of my instructors would never do that because they grew up in the system, and I don't do that. And so they knew that was. But some of them get that at home from mom or dad, and so that comes out, and then you address it. And you say you cannot say, because you're just hardening the negative behavior, and then you're going to get this result. So you can be very specific with how you do that. And then once they become a black belt, you can put them in the class and say, now you're going to become an instructor. So what I would do, say you're going to be an instructor Monday at 5 in this class in April. Right now it's January. You're going to shadow, the teacher who's there now for the next 5 Mondays in a row. And she's going to give you feedback at the end of every class. And little by little, she's going to give you more responsibility. And then I would talk to that instructor. I want you to step back, let him do more of it, and you give him feedback. Use the form. Use the form, because I don't want you to come up with your own. You don't want anybody to make up. Everything comes down to scripts, checklists, and system. The system runs the class. The student or the people, the black belt runs the system, right? So if the system is scripts and checklists, you let the system, you write it as the head instructor, you write it, I write it down. I know exactly what I want to have happen, because I know that I've been doing it for so long. I'm really good at it, but I also know that you can be better at it than I am if I give you the right tools. But if I rely upon you to just come up with your own personality, and then you're Monday at 5, all of a sudden everybody wants to go to your class and they don't want to go to Tuesday at 5 because she's not as a dynamic instructor, right? This is what happens too. Now I've got a problem. And then you go away to college if it's a kid, or you quit, or you open a school down the street. Now I'm in big trouble because you're going to suck all those students away. Instead, I want the system to be so strong that even if this weak instructor on Tuesday is not as strong, it's consistent. All the students are learning the same amount of things. They're getting the same kind of feedback. They're hearing the same words. Mom and dad, when they hear it, are hearing the same things that the instructor Monday says. The instructor Monday might have a bigger personality, and they might have 10, 15% more interest, but it's not going to be 90 to 10. And that's what happens too. If you look at a schedule in a lot of schools, if they have more than one instructor, you have, a few big classes, and then everybody else has just a tiny bit. Everybody's getting paid the same. But again, and the biggest danger is when that one person quits, that instructor, or they leave, or they age out, or whatever, you're in trouble, because then they go into the teacher on Tuesday night who's not as strong, not as dynamic, isn't naturally really good at it. The parents will quit and go away because they'll say, well, not as good. My kid doesn't pay attention to him as well as he did him. So, we're going to take our $150 somewhere else. And usually they don't go somewhere else. They just quit.
That's it now. And finally, Matt, what one piece of advice would you give someone starting out and teaching kids martial arts?
Slow down. The best thing that you can do is slow down. And that's literally with your words. If you say 2 or 3 things and stop, pause, that allows it to sink in. almost every kid starts talking, and you know, the instructor, and they get in there and they're excited or they're nervous and whatever, and they're talking like this, and everything goes past so fast that nobody can understand it, and it causes this kind of nervous energy too. And then the kids aren't listening to you, and then you get frustrated, and you get louder and faster and louder and faster, higher pitched voice, and the kids only pay attention. When you slow down, your voice has to literally drop, and then it changes so much. That was the one thing that I would identify with almost everybody and that we worked on the most. And the funny thing is, the American president, Barack Obama, is my least favorite president, even with the current guy, because you know, there's so much stuff going on here, and I don't want to get political, especially on your podcast. However, what Barack Obama did so well was he never spoke in more than 3-word combinations. And that's a trained technique. He didn't invent it. A lot of politicians learn that. News presenters learn that. You say, and then when you make videos like I do, you also try to put pause points in for the same reason. You want people to understand what it is that you're saying, but also it makes it easier when you edit, right? So if you can take a couple things, you're like, oh, that's where I need to edit, but then the other sound comes in and it makes it harder. So slow down. If you want to be a great instructor, slow down and listen to yourself.
Excellent. Well, it was a pleasure having you on today, Matt.
It's great to see you again.
Honor. And all the best with your classes this evening. I know you're quite a busy man.
It's what I've asked for, so I've got no complaints.
Excellent. Thank you.
Working hard.